Pete, welcome to Realistic Happiness Podcast.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Yes, and it's so nice to meet you as well because you fulfilled one of my lifelong dreams as well. You wrote a whole book.
Yes.
A whole book. And it looks amazing.
Certainly did. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
What was the driving force behind creating this book then?
I think that the driving force for me was a couple of things. I got to a point in my life where I knew that I wanted to do something more. And I was really fussed about making an impact and seeing others benefit from that. So I was thinking about, do I go down sort of further academic study myself? But I will really sort of buzz off my own growth and the growth of others. So that's when I went after writing the book and really thinking about how can I make the most impact and sort of pass on knowledge to others. And then it was coupled with something I see a lot in our society and our culture, which is that sense of overwhelm. And actually, in terms of self-development, there are thousands, if not millions at this point, of books, podcasts, Instagram posts in terms of how do I grow, how do I improve, how do I become happier? And what I wanted to do with this, much like you're doing with this podcast, is go, right, what should I be paying attention to? And actually do some of the heavy lifting for people. So that's where we got to with this.
It's a very deep read. It's called The Better Human Blueprint. And I will dissect it a bit, basically. Not reveal too much, because we want you to buy this book and binge it yourself. But in a nutshell, if I'm tuning into this episode, what am I going to get out of this? What can I expect from you?
Sure. So ultimately, it's about finding fulfillment. That's what I talk about. It's finding fulfillment in your personal and professional life. So what this book isn't, is it's not just yet another person's view on the world. So it's not, here's what I think it is. It's about taking what I think are the key steps to finding fulfillment and distilling them down into a way that's easy to read. So every chapter introduces you to a topic that I think is what it takes to find fulfillment. And then it says, look, here's enough theory so you understand the topic. You won't become an expert, but let's be honest, most of us don't need to be experts in all of these different things. But here's enough so you'll understand, I don't know, whether it's purpose, whether it's vulnerability, relationships, decision-making, leadership, teamwork. Tell me enough so I understand what's going on. And then I provide practical tools, tips and techniques. So straight away you can go, okay, that's lovely. Now how do I benefit straight away? And then I have a section in there called Go Deeper, which is if you're really interested in that topic, here are the books, here are the podcasts or the TED Talks that you should go and listen if you're really interested. So for instance, vulnerability, I talk about it and then I say, okay, Brené Brown, here's some books. Go and check those out if you're really interested in a topic. So that's it. It's that practical understanding. And when it comes to fulfillment, it's about three things for me, or three strands as I call them, which is meaningful foundations, meaningful alignment and meaningful connection.
Yes, I agree. And I want to dive into that. I'm going to reference the book as we speak, because that's the very first chapter, right? The meaningful foundation and actually living with purpose. What are your thoughts about purpose then in life and in work? Because I have a bit of a hot take on it, but I'm just curious, what the essence is in the book. What do you believe about it?
Yeah, definitely. So purpose, absolutely, it sits under that first strand of meaningful foundation. So I talk about, going slightly sciencey for a second, I talk about cognitive foundations, so the way we think. I talk about emotional foundations, so the way we feel. And then combining the two, we then go into vulnerability and authenticity. So that's sort of the three elements of foundations. And purpose, I talk about in that cognitive way, so how we think about it. Purpose is a really interesting topic, and it gets talked about a lot and it gets misunderstood a lot. So I'm fascinated to hear your hot take in a sec, and I'll risk falling into the trap by going with kind of what I talk about. I think one of the biggest things for me is a purpose isn't passion. Those two things need separating. So people say, go find your passion. Rubbish advice. Because actually it implies that there's just this perfect passion that you can go and find one day and go, oh, that's it. And then your life's sorted. That's not helpful. Passions can be grown, developed, and you have to put a lot of work in. So we almost grow this culture of, if something feels like hard work, oh, it must not be my passion, which is just unhelpful. And then you go into purpose, or there's another thing I talk about with sort of the common myths around this, which is follow the money. Generally, we're kind of getting to the point where we understand money doesn't make you happy. I like the counter to it, which Stephen Bartlett talks about, but money does solve for unhappiness. So I think there's that element of realism that if you can't afford to eat, now's not the time to be talking about, well, what's my purpose in life? It's like, right, let's get some food on the table. And so what this leads to me is Ikigai, which is that 4 elements of purpose, which is that what you love, what you're great at, what the world needs, and then what you can be paid for. So I think if you're speaking about those 4 and finding this sort of the intersection of those, now that is a westernized version of Ikigai. I'm okay with that. And I think that's how we take that into really helpful career advice. So for me, we need to stop asking children and even adults, what do you want to be when you grow up? Creates too much pressure. But actually start talking to people about, okay, well, what is your Ikigai? Working through those steps. And what I've done in the book, for instance, is given loads of questions that can help people go, okay, let's start answering all of those. And then that leads to helping guide you with your decision making and all sorts. So that's my sort of thinking. How does that fit with what's your hot take? Let's hear it.
I'm just going to play devil's advocate. No, I think it's important to, like you said, passion versus purpose. They are really, really different things. I've basically spoken to a lot of people on this podcast as well, but also individuals. And I find that people who also, just work in a supermarket and don't really have, or they're cleaners or something like this, right? Like low maintenance kind of work, or waitressing, especially like people who work in cafes or barbers even as well. Low maintenance work that they kind of can leave it behind and then go home and actually do what they're, passionate about, or their purpose, right? What feeds that fire inside. I also see that they're really the happiest people and they don't have purpose per se at work, right? So what are your thoughts about that?
I think it's really important. I would say they absolutely do have a purpose and have purpose, but it's about what is that purpose. So I think in a way we can feel pressured to define our purpose, our why, if you want to go into sort of Simon Sinek speak, into something that sounds really grand and really impressive. But it might be your purpose is to raise a happy family. And that's equally as valid as someone who feels their purpose is to go and start an organization. So those two are absolutely fine. And then you can apply your Ikigai into go, okay, well, what do I love doing? I love spending time with my family. Amazing. Can I get paid for that? Well, probably not. What am I, and then you work through those elements and go, okay, well, work for me is just a tool that's going to give me enough money that I can spend time with my family. Or if I'm not working at that point, it's still combining those elements into a life that says, how can I get to a life that I'm happy with? So if I'm finding my purpose, I'm finding what my passions outside of work, that's absolutely fine. I still think, though, there's opportunities in choosing the type of work that you do to live out some of your passions and your purpose. And I'm using those so don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-passions. That'd be incredibly boring life. It's just about knowing that you can have multiple passions. So if we take those couple of examples, if we go with sort of cleaner, supermarket worker and barista, those are going to suit very different people. So if if you love people and you love talking to people, then actually you're going to be better suited to working in a cafe than working as a cleaner. So even then, I would say it's guiding that, and it's linking to organizational purpose. So for instance, if you're passionate about sustainability and you love talking to people, then you're probably going to be happiest in maybe a local independent cafe that works really hard on its sustainability than maybe a big corporate. And that can go right the way through. So there's a really famous example of JFK visiting NASA, and he spoke to a cleaner and he asked them, well, what are you doing? And the answer was, I'm helping put a man on the moon. So it's even that, I would say, as an organizational view of how are you helping every single person understand how what they do links to that organizational message or organizational mission. So it's that piece of whatever the work, and Dan Pink talks about this in Human Motivation. So task, time, technique, and team, the 4 key bits of motivation. Helping people understand what are they doing, giving them control over those elements. And if the work's rubbish and just needs doing, it's understanding that. But how does that link to what I'm doing? So every single piece contributes. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and I just personal experience. Yeah, I've embodied that. I started in waitressing, dentist assistant, like I always found the enjoyment of like connecting people and helping people. And now with the podcast and my own business, I'm doing exactly the same. So I am living my ikigai. You should definitely do your ikigai test. I think it's mind-blowing to just figure things out like this. But also being multi-passionate.
Yep.
I speak to a lot of like students, etc., even people just stuck at work that are like kind of like a spider diagram, like I could go down this way, or but I really enjoy this, what if I miss out if I don't do this? Or like same as me, like I could also just stop doing this and then do DJing that I enjoy, or I could become a writer, or I would love to be a Formula One presenter. I just ditch this and then just, I don't know, do a scholarship, whatever, and then go in that path. So like even then, like what if your brain is like playing tricks on you and it's like, okay, I found my passions, multiple, what the hell what do I do now? Which path do I take, Pete?
I think, look, it's boiling it down to that single purpose. So people talk about, do you have multiple purposes and all sorts, and does it change? For me, I think it's, you have one purpose and it evolves over time. So it's about better understanding that. So I talk in my book, I've had sort of 3 or 4 different definitions of my purpose, but you can follow it through. So when I was sort of 14, 15, and the classic, what do you want to do when you grow up? I didn't know, which is fine. Can I just be really clear? It's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine at 40 if you don't know what you want to do. But I knew I wanted to work with people. So I'm happy if I'm working with people and I'm making an impact. And I think that's the thing of going and trying stuff, but giving it a good effort to be like, well, it's not about what I tried. I think there's a difference. Do you enjoy it? And is it hard? But it's worth sustaining with. So you see a lot of high performance individuals. If you listen to them, their parents are often ones who've said, you know, you're going to try that, but you've got to stick it out for a season or a time, rather than running and going, well, I did that for 2 weeks, didn't really like it, so maybe that's not my passion. No, that just means you're maybe not very good at being bad at something. I then think it's about working through those stages. So classic example for me, when I was thinking about which master's degree I wanted to do. So I'd done psychology, and I was thinking about, do I go down occupational psychology, so the study of work and organisations, or forensic psychology, study of criminals, and all sorts of deviant behaviour, etc. That was a really difficult decision because I liked both. Both are super interesting. Arguably forensics potentially more sexy, for want of a better word. I'd done work experience at both, so I'd worked in both industries. And what it eventually boiled down to was I felt like there was more work opportunities in occupational psychology. So I went down that route, and it's kind of worked out. I'm sat here with a book. I've got a vague idea. I think I made the right choice. Yeah. And I'm here. That doesn't mean I wouldn't have enjoyed myself doing forensic psychology. So I think it's about taking the pressure off. But had I known my sort of purpose, my ikigai at that point, so I define my purpose as to pursue better in myself and others so that we can achieve more than we ever thought possible. So actually, if I'd known that, that would have made occupational psychology a really easy choice for me. And it's just about that constant kind of, well, does that decision advance my purpose or not? So I think like explore it and then look for opportunities. So it might be, I talk to a lot of people, so I'm very passionate about diversity and inclusion. It's one of my values, so inclusivity. And people talk a lot that I'd say, so how do I do a job in that area? That's amazing. There are some jobs in that, but also in any organisation, there will be colleague network groups that you can get involved with. I'm passionate about sport sometimes. So I was talking to you earlier, I've spent some time working with a sports club through my job, and I'm loving that. But I'm also involved in running a hockey club. So actually spare time. Now I've made a decision with my career that I am never going to pursue something that means I don't have a life outside of work. I don't have time to spend time with my wife. And I think that's a really important point as well, that you leave yourself time for passions outside of work.
So essentially what you're saying is we don't need to find like the full purpose and passion, like put the pressure just at work.
Absolutely.
You can really, and it also looks different for everyone, like you said. Like for me and you, it looks different, but for the person that works at Tesco's or at the barber, it just looks different. And you need to mold your life. Like you shouldn't copy what other people are doing. You should do what sets your heart on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taking the pressure off yourself and
Yeah.
looking for that. So I don't talk about work-life balance. I talk about work-life harmony. And it's those different bits just kind of coming together and going, what am I doing? And I think the important thing is it's about going, just because I'm working in a job that maybe isn't that exciting to others, how am I living out my purpose? How am I living out my passion? So if it is talking to other people, it's spending time in those roles going, okay, let's do that. Maybe it is just being part of something bigger. That's what you want to do, working behind the scenes. All great. Or it's understanding that your job is a ticket to doing something else. So you do that job so that you can put food on a table so your family can be happy, and that's your purpose. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah. Do you think purpose should be energizing or draining? Because you can imagine if you work for really big companies or like a huge mission, like if you're SpaceX and you're trying to go to Mars, right? Like it can be exhausting.
So purpose is the fire that never goes out, right? So it doesn't mean you're not tired, but it's that bit that you're always going to keep going. So if you're somewhere and you feel absolutely burnt out, chances are you've moved away from your purpose. So there's a really interesting piece of research that Adam Grant talks about, which is about dealing with burnout. So the classic thing, if you're burnt out, and that's a real problem in our society, the answers are always do less work, take some time off, all the normal stuff. Absolutely brilliant. One of the other things you can do if you're burnt out is find more rewarding work. So sometimes the answer isn't just to stop, but it's actually look at what you're doing and do stuff. So I would say if you're working towards something but you're feeling absolutely burnt out, the chances are that's telling you. So we talk about emotions. Actually, the guides say signposting something to go, right, I'm really tired, I'm exhausted the whole time. That's a sign saying you might be doing the wrong thing. And that's what I'd say in terms of, so if you think you're working on your purpose but you're exhausted, that's maybe a sign. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to start your own business, you're trying to work your podcast, you might say, for this time period, I know I've got to give everything I've got, and then I'm going to. But then you're at risk of, we talk about the arrival fallacy, so never being happy because there's always that sort of hedonic treadmill of, it's, I'm always waiting for yet. But I would say, if you're absolutely burnt out, you're exhausted, maybe have a think about, well, maybe this isn't, I'm maybe not driving towards my purpose.
That's what I like about your book as well. So the foundation, like chapter 1 is about the foundation and just discovering what you like, your purpose.
Yeah.
And then the second one is more about the emotions you can kind of equip yourself with, like emotional intelligence, like self-reflection, embracing as well, understanding, like you've just explained about burnout, it's like a really nice way to like understand the foundation and then like the emotional side of it. And I don't think it's talked about enough, like together.
No, exactly. And that's why I've split it out. So you've got that sort of, so emotional agility, which is effectively something I started to talk about there. So what I started to talk about there was constructed emotion theory by Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who says almost, what if everything we've ever been told about emotions is wrong? They're not an uncontrollable thing that we don't do. They're signposts. They're our body, our brain making predictions of how we should feel. So the example that I talk about, Dr. Feldman Barrett uses is sort of a rumbling stomach, that sort of feeling in our stomach that, in a couple of hours, we'll probably feel quite hungry, and maybe we go to the kitchen, and if our stomach is rumbling, that's us telling ourselves we're hungry. If we're in a hospital waiting room, and our partner or our significant other or family member is in the next room and we're waiting to hear some results from an operation and we experience that same sensation, we are going to label that as anxiety. It's the same feeling. So hang on, what's going on there? And actually, if we're about to go on a roller coaster ride, for some people that might be dread, for others that might be excitement. Yeah, exactly. I can see your face. That's dread right there. But it's the same feeling. So actually, it's that piece of going, what is going on there? And actually, if we start labeling that feeling, so saying, I'm excited for this, it's my body. All that's happening is my body's preparing it for action. And there's a quote that I love that's, I think, quoted from a martial arts instructor about getting your butterflies to fly in formation. That's what we're doing there. And that's linking to then emotional agility, which is recognizing, accepting, responding. So what's happening? There's no such thing as bad emotions. That's kind of, it gets a bad rap. Everything is telling us something. So if we're feeling a certain way, that's a sign we're not happy with something. And then how we choose to respond. And then you go into things like resilience. But yeah, we have those sort of emotional foundations, cognitive foundations of purpose, vulnerability, emotion, and then that sort of next layer up is, okay, well, how do we live in alignment with, which is why it's meaningful alignment, how do we live in alignment with our purpose, our emotions? Because if we figured everything out, but we're not living in alignment with it, there's no point, right?
Yeah, it's like logical mind versus the heart.
Head versus heart, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wow. And I think if I'm just someone listening to this and thinking, yes, I agree. I think what people have trouble with, especially with things like anger, imagine like in the workplace, you get frustrated really fast, you're angry, like you're not having a good time, you are out of alignment, but logic is saying you need to stay because the market's shit, we need to pay the bills, we need money, we need some stability in life, you know? So people are afraid to feel and they block it. And I think this is why it's really important that you've mentioned emotional agility and just embracing and understanding, and even like you've laid it out logically, but you're making people feel. I think that's what's important to say, because they're avoiding it for logical reasons, and that's going to bite you in the ass eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about it's kind of that bottling or brooding when it comes to emotions. So they're the two common strategies, right? It's like, my boss isn't that annoying, or I'm not feeling this. So, no, you are. And actually you might, so that would be the sort of emotional agility thing. And we talk about sort of minding the gap in terms of stimulus and response. So every day we're getting thousands of thousands of stimulus. We need to choose how we respond. So I always live by, you should never, you can't get angry for people acting the way that they always act. So if someone's consistently acting in a certain way, at some point it's on you to say, well, I can't get angry at that because they're consistent. So I have to choose how I respond. And that can be a family member that comes up so often. It's like, they always say that when we're around. It's like, oh yeah, so choose how you respond. And actually, instead of the work situation, if you're stuck at work for whatever reason, maybe you're studying at the time and you want to finish that, or maybe it's as simple as, like you say, there's no alternatives. It's not healthy to sit there with a bottled up emotion. It's about going, okay, well, what's my plan? Is my plan I'm going to stay here for 18 months, I'm going to stay here to the next one? Or is the plan, I just need to budget a bit more and think about where are my other options, what else can I do? Or is my plan, well, how am I spending my time outside of work? Because often you see that vicious cycle, right? Work's crap, so I go home, so I eat crap, I watch telly, binge Netflix, I stay up late because when I go to bed, that means the morning's coming and work's coming. So you're in a really bad place and you can't get out of it, versus, all right, let's take control of my time outside of work, eat healthily, do exercise, get in a better place and think of where those other opportunities are. And that's where I think that sort of chase your passions becomes unhelpful, because actually if I'm that person or I'm chatting to that person, probably the worst thing I need to say is, go chase your passion. Don't worry about food on the table. But bottling it up and just being like, no, it's fine. I'm not unhappy isn't going to help anybody. Yeah, control the controllables comes to mind. And if you can't control work, like you said, even though it's a bit more effort, after work, because you do, especially if you're burnt out or like absolutely drained, the last thing you want to do is cook a long, healthy meal and then go to the gym or a walk, but they have tremendous effects. That's it. Or cold water swimming. I just had a cold shower this morning. I do it quite often. Yeah. It helps a lot. That's exactly it. Yeah, whatever your thing is, whatever it is, exercise or meal planning or something, like that has to be the way. They say that with like a logical mind, like if you're trying to like get into your emotions, to move your body a bit, right? To like get out of the brain and go into the body. It's about developing good habits. So I talk about that in terms of high performance, and it's habit stacking, and it's all about that sort of place of it's implementation intentions. So if you know that when you get in from work, you're not going to feel like going to the gym, then it's about doing everything you can to make that easy. So it's about getting all of your gym stuff out beforehand, or maybe it's changing your routine. So for me, I try and exercise first thing because I know I work from home most of the time. I know that as my day goes on, I start losing control of the time, jump into the meetings or whatever. So first thing in the morning or lunchtime, but it's all of the gym stuff. So it's all that behavior stuff. Make it easy, make it attractive, make it satisfying, and make it all those things that you can. So James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits. Like, how do I make it as easy as humanly possible for me to do those behaviors, or stack it onto something you already do? So if you know that, when I get home, I will turn the telly on. That's my default. Every day I get home, I whack the telly on. Change the behaviour. So you say, right, before I put that telly on, I need to go and do 10 sit-ups. I don't know. You set that and go, okay, before I've done that, I have to do this. Just start working into your existing routines. It's going to be massive.
Yeah, and I also love in the book, so you also talk about action, which is what this is, but also like aligning your decisions as well, because I love the system 1 and system 2. Obsessed with it. I don't know if many people know what that means. Could you care to explain?
Yeah, sure. So Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. So he talks about this. There's 2 systems of decision making in our brain, right? 2 ways we think about things. So system 1, fast, system 2, slow. So effectively, right, humans are lazy. We know this. We're always going to try and find the easiest way. That's fine, you know. In the same way, water running down a hill is going to find the path of least resistance. So we will automate things. And the best way I can think to describe this is when we're driving, right? And we talk about when you learn to drive, or before you learn to drive, you have no idea what's going on. So you have unconscious incompetence. And then as you start to learn, you sit at a car and you go, I've got absolutely no idea what I'm doing here. What are these pedals? What's this? Well, steering wheel, most people can figure out that turns the wheels. But you become consciously incompetent. And then you start to learn to drive. And hopefully you get to a stage called conscious competence, which is when you know how to do stuff, but you have to think about it. And then over time, you become unconsciously competent. So that's what happens when you're driving and suddenly you go, how on earth did I get here? That's unconscious competence because you're not thinking about it anymore. And it's kind of the same thing with thinking. So you go through life, it would take forever if we had to think about putting one foot in front of the other when we're walking. Or how do I type? How do I send a text message? All of those things, system one, we don't need to think about it. But if we then go to another country, so me getting from the airport to here today, you know, if I'm getting from my house to Southampton Airport, very happy, system one, don't need to think about that. I then move into system 2, which is I really need to think about where I'm going. I need to check where am I going, which mode of transport, which is faster. Thankfully, the airport's got Wi-Fi, so I'm looking, I've got real-time information. So that's all it is, basically. So what we want to be doing is not about using system 2, using our slow thinking for everything, because we never get anything done. But it's about recognizing when should we be using system 2 when our brain is trying a shortcut. So that's when we get into biases and prejudice and all sorts. And when do we need to interrupt that? Versus system 1, yeah, this is safe, this is easy, off we go, happy days.
Yeah, and it's so subconscious. It's so frustrating. You have to break that pattern like you did with the sit-ups and turning on the TV, right? It's so frustrating. And for me, I don't know if this is normal, but I have it at the same time.
Okay.
Sometimes, you know, like we've got the kind of slower part, system 1 or system 2. We've got the slower part that's like, yeah, this is easy. Like, for example, the cold shower this morning. Yeah. I was like, no one is watching.
Yeah.
We don't need to do it. You're going to have a good day, probably better without having a cold shower.
Yeah.
And then the other part of my brain was like, Daisy, we promised it's good for you. It's horrible for 10 seconds or however long, but you're going to reap the benefits like you promised.
That's it. So I mean, that's all in system 2, right? Because you're slow, you're thinking about it. It's just, you're fighting with yourself, which is totally natural, right?
Yeah, we have, and it's frustrating. It's really, really annoying. We just want to, like, especially with like finding purpose and fulfillment, especially at work, actually in life as well. We want it to be easy. We want it to be like, oh, like, I just want to know. So then I can just spearhead and go through it. How was it for you? I'm more curious about like your personal experience with it. Because obviously you wrote the book, you had like an agenda with it, you want to help others, but you would have experienced that yourself.
In terms of sort of finding my own purpose?
Yeah, like especially like, for example, when leaving school, that's like the biggest thing where you're just like,
it's hard. So I would say, I don't think actually any of the jobs that I've done, I knew existed when I was at school. So I've been a project manager, I've been a recruitment consultant, I've been an organisational development consultant. That's what I am now. I don't think many adults know what that job is. I think I know what it is.
Yeah, I only found out through you.
Well, exactly. HR business partner. Maybe I knew something about HR, but I didn't understand the sort of the value and actually what the people function can do. And I think, through trial and error, you figure this stuff out. I did and I talk about this in the book, I did my year 10 work experience in an engineering company because I thought that's what I wanted to do. I was rubbish. I have no idea. I think I was interested in sport and just looking for ways in that. But you figure it out as you go. I was a rubbish recruiter. I was put into sort of temporaries recruitment. Some of the feedback I'm probably the proudest of, I got told I care too much about people to be good at the job. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can live with that. That tells me I'm in the wrong place. I think knowing that what I know now, I think if I've been put in sort of permanent recruitment, finding people the right job, rather than just quick and dirty, we need someone to cover an 8-hour shift, I think I would have been all right. But from there, I knew I wanted to get into learning and development, and I'd been a sports coach, so working that through. And then it's just been, for me, I get bored very easily. So I've moved around quite a bit. I know that sort of project type environment. Go in, solve a problem, move on. That's kind of what's driven. And if I look back at my career, that's what this has been about. And it's kind of led to the book and what I do now in terms of helping organizations build career frameworks, get their top teams performing, designing organizations. It really works for me. Going in, what's the problem? Solve the problem. Either move on or work on the next problem with that organization. So I think that's good. And I talk about how my purpose has gone through a few. And it's reflected that kind of from working more like as a trainer with groups into sort of on a bigger scale in projects, and that Pursue Better has been sort of emerged out of it. It's been a lot of trial and error, and I talk about as well, it's sort of discovering that sort of Ikigai concept helped me a while ago with my hockey umpiring that I do. I had the chance to either sort of pursue umpire at the highest level I possibly could. So the conversation started to be, right, if you really give everything to this umpiring, then maybe the Olympics one day as an umpire. At the same time, it's like, well, actually, here's an opportunity to look after sort of the club umpiring and grow others. No, make a guy, that decision took about 5 seconds. It was like, well, I can't give all of my life over to just pushing myself, as interesting as that would be. Let's have the balance and actually contribute to the growth of others. So I think it's been an interesting process. It's been iterative. It's that kind of, let's try this out. Not everything's been easy. And I haven't got everything right. But I think it's interesting, and you win or you learn. So there you go.
You mentioned as well about being rubbish when you did the engineering and also recruitment, which is totally relatable. I think we're all kind of rubbish at the start of every job. We don't know everything. How did you know, or is it covered in the book at all? Like, when do you persevere and keep going when you still feel not good enough or rubbish in a job? Because I can imagine, like, if you leave too soon and then you think, I don't know, 10 years later, you're like, I really wish I stuck out with that. Like, I want to go back to that. Or if you do push through and you're just like, now I'm stuck. I hate this. Like this is all I know.
It's a really good question. So, I talk about grit in terms of that perseverance. And I think it's about, there's a couple of things, right? So there's a difference between being rubbish and hating something. I think that's key. So that feedback for me, you care too much to be good. Okay, it's starting to tell me I'm in the wrong place. So what's my plan? So my plan, as I said, I was on a graduate scheme. I was thinking about, well, I'm going to do this for a set amount of time, and then I'll move on to learning and development. What can I learn in this time period? And then there's a couple of techniques that you can have. But before the technique, I think there's something called the sunk cost fallacy. So sunk cost is about, we're giving too much to something that's gone, right? So, I've invested some money, it's tanking. Well, if I put a bit more in, maybe I'll get us back. Or I'm watching a film, I'm reading a book, I'm not really enjoying this, but I've already given it half an hour. I'm going to finish this because I don't like stopping things halfway through. That's a sunk cost fallacy. You're kind of just giving more to something that's gone, and actually you need to know when to pull the plug. So my wife and I, we have sort of a half an hour rule with films. It's like, actually, if we get to half an hour, we'll give any film half an hour. If we're not enjoying it, half an hour, done. You hear people giving a film 5-10 minutes. I think, well, that's harsh. Book, 100 pages rule for me. If I'm 100 pages in, not enjoying it, off it goes. Maybe I miss out on one or two amazing things that have just taken that long to get going. So I'd say in work, it's the same thing, actually, if you have your own time limits. And then the technique you can put in is tripwires. So this is the Van Halen Brown M&M's clause. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Van Halen's a classic rock band. They had a clause in their rider for gigs that in their dressing room, they wanted a bowl of M&M's with all the brown ones taken out. And this wasn't because they were sort of prima donnas. I mean, they might have been prima donnas, but what this was about, their stage setup was really complex, and they had loads of detailed instructions that venues needed to follow. They didn't have time to check it all before every gig, right? That would have taken hours. So they put a simple thing in that meant they could walk into the dressing room and check the bowl of M&M's. If they found a single brown M&M, that meant that these people weren't reading and following the instructions. So that told them, tripwire, they need to check everything. So you can put your own tripwires in. So what is it that when that goes, you need to stop, you need to think? So often this can be about spending, or it can be eating, it can be exercising, because exercising can become an unhealthy habit. But it's that same thing in work, that maybe you go, it's not about the job, it's maybe I do something at home when I'm stressed, or, if I lash out at my partner, that's the tripwire to go, hang on, that's my moment to really evaluate. Or it's, a 6-week time check-in, whatever that is. But that's something I think you can put in to be like, what's my tripwire that goes, I'm going to give this a certain amount of time, or when these things start happening. That's a really powerful technique.
Wow, I've never tried it, but you can really accelerate your development, your self-development doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, it's mind-blowing, because you've given like a framework, but it can fit into all sorts of lifestyles as well. It doesn't have to be just one profession or one like parents or something like this. It can really work for people leaving school, uni, etc. Like, wow, you can really apply that to a lot of things.
That's it. We did it. So my wife and I did it when we were planning our wedding. We had a tripwire of £100. So we said that neither of us could spend £100 on something without both of us being there. And it had nothing to do with me not trusting my wife spending, or to be honest, in our relationship it's the other way around. But what it meant was neither of us could be pressured by family members, by vendors, into spending more than we wanted without the other there. So it's just that real sense of, here's something to protect you or to serve as that warning. And if you're a business, if you're investing, it's go, okay, well, off you go. You can have £5,000 budget to go and play, but at that point you need to come back. If you're trying to start your own business, it's the same principle. Yeah, if you're coming out of school, maybe, I'm going to do 3 shifts, trial shifts or whatever, but actually then I'm going to come back because that's not right for me. But it's getting clear on, as like I say, to be really clear, this isn't about, I think it's the right thing for me, but it's hard. This isn't an excuse to give up. It's about making sure you're clear, what is my tripwire.
Yeah. I also want to touch on high performance, because you mentioned it in the book as well. Do you think if you enjoy your work, like it's your passion and everything, that you tend to be a more natural high performer than, for example, someone who's like in a sales job just to make a shitload of money and then move to Dubai or whatever?
Yeah.
Do you see the difference, like in those kind of individuals with how they perform?
Do you know what? That's a really great question. I don't know, is the honest answer. I think there's a couple of things there. So in terms of natural high performers, I think natural talent is a myth. So there's a lot of stuff around sort of deliberate practice, and the 10,000 hours rule. So 10,000 hours rule, do 10,000 hours of practice and anything, you'll be a world class. It's a bit oversimplified. So there'll be people listening now going, oh, that's all been disproven. It hasn't been. It's an oversimplification. So 10,000 hours of deliberate practice in the right environment with the right supporting cast and all sorts. So, you take Tiger Woods, for instance. He's often called a natural talent, but also, at 3 years old, he was holding a golf club doing all that practice. And there's a lot of sort of natural geniuses, but if you look at the hours of practice that went in, so there's that piece. I think if you enjoy what you do, you're going to put more of yourself into it, and therefore the chances are you will be better. But I also think if you have a strong enough motivator, so the example you gave there of I want to go and make enough money so I can move to Dubai, I don't see why that can't be a strong enough motivator that you couldn't outperform someone who sort of naturally enjoys that profession. I think there'll always be those who are motivated will outperform those who are not. Does it matter why you are motivated? So is it intrinsic versus extrinsic? Intrinsic motivation will last longer. So I guess that's my point. That's kind of what I think. I think an intrinsically motivated, so someone who does it for the enjoyment, for the love, will last longer, will have a sort of that sustained high performance. Whereas someone who hates what they're doing, but is doing it for financial gain, may burn brighter, but will burn out faster. So that's the piece in terms of, we know that money isn't a long-term motivator. So I think if, in a one-off performance situation, could someone just motivated by money make a better sale than someone who's naturally enjoying and believes in what they sell? Yes, of course they can. Are they still going to be doing and performing at the same level in 5, 10, 15 years? Probably not, no, because that internal intrinsic motivation is what's needed for sustained high performance.
Yeah. What's something, I'm just going to throw a curveball here.
Love it.
With like a high performer, for example, what's something that you've seen that none get right unless it's too late?
Something that no high performers get right.
Big question.
I think the two that sort of jump to mind that can be unhealthy, there's an unhealthy association with high performance, is failure and perfectionism, and all that piece of high performance means I don't fail. Absolutely not. So when I look at the true high performers versus people who like to sort of shout about all of their success, growth mindset versus perfectionism, perfectionism doesn't equal high performance. So perfectionism is all about what will others think. There is no correlation between perfectionism and success in the workplace and success in life. Unhelpfully, there is a correlation between perfectionism and performance at school. And the reason for that is that there is a right answer at school. Right, so you sit and you do an exam, there's a mark scheme, there's a right answer. So it is possible to be perfect at school in your academic studies. So that kind of trains a behavior that goes, well, if I'm perfect, then if I can do these things, if I remove any error, off I go. And then we add in sort of helicopter parenting and all sorts, and we remove any opportunity for children to fail. We get this really unhealthy mindset of A, I win at everything I do, and B, I don't know how to fail. That then goes into adult life, and realistically, it's very rare that there is a right answer at work or in our social lives. There's good answers, there are better answers, but it's often there's not a right answer. So that's when it becomes really unhelpful for perfectionism, and that's when we get to burnout. Instead, it's about embracing failure. So actually, failure is something that we should shout about. And actually, what I would say there is if you can't give an example of where you failed, you're on the route to average. Because that, for me, is a sign that you're not trying, you're not pushing the boundaries. So the best high performers I see are ones that fail and learn. And I had this, I'm an advocate of organisations that start up things like failure clubs and innovation. And so Stephen Bartlett talks about celebrating failures, celebrate the attempt. And I did this at work. I shared a project that failed. We tried to do something. It didn't work. It was very, very simple. And I shared in a it was kind of a town hall, a corporate all hands type thing where everyone gets together and usually says how amazing their projects are going. And I said, yeah, we've done this one. It's gone wrong. We're binning the project. But here's what we've learned. We've learned that this style of training, as an organisation, we're not ready for these reasons. So here's what I've learned. The amount of messages I got afterwards saying, you didn't fail, it's fine. No, it's fine, it's fine. And I went back to every single one. No, I did fail, and it's still fine, because here's what I've learned. So I'd say that's the two things I see in the sort of pursuit of high performance that people get wrong. It's a slight tweak of the question, but that's what I'd see, sort of a fear of failure, and cultures that aren't psychologically safe, and we can go there, and then that sort of pursuit of perfectionism as well.
Yeah. I think with the fear of failure, what I don't really understand from like a psychology, I guess, perspective is that, of course, it's ingrained in us because like the primitive kind of brain, we want to be accepted.
Yep.
So if we fail and we own up to it, of course, we're building trust. Let's say like you, for example, getting all the messages, people supporting you, but then we're kind of excluding, like purposely like excluding ourselves. And for our brain, that feels, it doesn't feel good, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the sort of psychological safety comes in. So psychological safety is quite simply an environment where people can suggest ideas without fear of ridicule. So there's also that sort of difference where we have to interrupt failure and shame. So shame versus guilt. So guilt, I did something bad. Shame, I am bad. And it's that separation of failure going, I failed, I'm going to get fired. And that culture of going, no, you failed because you're trying something new. And Amy Edmondson, who's kind of the Don of psychological safety, talks about there's different types of failure. And don't get me wrong, there are some types of failure that are just flat out bad. So you've got the kind of simple, repeatable failure. So if there's a clear way of doing things, so this can be, I don't know, life-saving operations, for instance. If there's a set way of doing it and you do it wrong, that's bad. We don't want people doing that wrong. But actually, and there's a different scale, which I'm not going to go into, but actually we want people failing in the right way, which is we're trying new things, we're exploring. So it's that sort of simple, repeatable failures. No, we don't want that. It's getting rid of that. But actually, like the example I gave, we were exploring, we were innovating, we were experimenting. That's what we want to encourage. So getting people okay with, it's good to try these things. And actually in our culture, we accept that rather than, oh yeah, I failed. And actually, therefore, if I do that again, I'm going to get fired. And that's where it's about culturally sort of leading from the front and seeing sort of business leaders right the way out going, well, how do we do this? And you only need to see it in sport, right? So we have, England lose a penalty shootout in the Euros and the players that miss get racial abuse. That is a culture saying we're not okay with failure, rather than actually saying we've got further than we ever did, we're going to try these things. There's great, sport always gives us, there are no failures in sport, it's about trying. There are if you make very simple mistakes, but if you are trying, you're experimenting, then that's the kind of failure we want.
I'm just thinking from like an individual's perspective. Of course, if I'm a leader and listening to this, I think, hell yeah, like it makes sense to start implementing this. But if I'm an individual and I'm like, okay, because the book is all about, helping myself, finding my purpose, etc. Can I find psychological safety like by having a strong foundation and setting boundaries and stuff, like even though I've been in a job for like 5 years, let's say?
Yeah, so I think for an individual, it's about that self-worth. And it's going, I am enough as I am. Full stop. Right. I am enough as I am. So if you're listening to this, you are enough. It's not about your achievements. You do not earn being enough. You are naturally enough. Just who you are, full stop. Cannot be clearer about that. It's then decoupling failure. If we see sort of, I don't know, self-worth, like the bottle of water next to me. If I've got a full bottle, I fail, so I pour a bit of my self-worth away. No, I'm still who I am. I'm still deserving of love, connection, and I'm going to try something over there. Yeah, I failed. Here's how I learned. But it comes back to that core of self-worth. And that's how the sort of vulnerability comes in. It goes, yeah, I tried that. Absolutely fine.
And then you have to voice this, I guess, to your colleagues and your boss.
That's it. And then you work in a team to go, okay, well, let's build that trust, as you talked about earlier, to go, right, as a team, here's how we're going to do it. And leadership doesn't just happen from the top, right? Everyone can lead. Everyone can set this culture up of going, as I talk about failure clubs at organisations, anyone can start that. It doesn't need to be a leader. Just get together. Next time you're in a team, let's talk about things we tried in the last week that didn't quite work. And I think for you as an individual, the really important thing that I want to see is, here's how I failed, and here's what I learned. So you do the same thing again. Well, you didn't learn, did you? So what is it that you're actually learning? So next time I'm going to do it better. And it might be you still failed. So I tried something, it didn't work. I learnt this. I tried it differently, it still didn't work, but I've learnt this, and next time I'm going to do it. And that's where everything we do individually, we can still, and just by role modelling that, by sharing what we've learnt, even just chatting to our partner at the end of the day, you can sort of just create that culture by what we talk about.
Absolutely. Was there something in the book, Pete, that we didn't cover that's quite important? Because I don't want to give so much away. Like, we did cover a lot, which has been incredible, and I can't wait to binge this when I go home. But was there a thing that's popping in your mind that we really need to address or talk about?
It's a really interesting one. I think there's so much in there we could go because of the way I've structured it in terms of each individual thing. So I would just sort of, it's that kind of summary for me of going, look, get your meaningful foundations right. So understand, what do I stand for? So that purpose, and linking that into emotions. So your personal values, absolutely critical. That sort of vulnerability. Vulnerability is courage. Vulnerability isn't a sort of soft, fluffy thing to be scared of. It is bravery. And then that only works if you live in alignment to that. So we've talked about that stimulus response, that minding the gap. So in every single situation, stimulus comes in, stop, decide how you respond. So every time you do something, you are choosing that response. So even if you say that thing without thinking, or you fire off that text without thinking, you've thought about that, you've decided to do that. So it's taking ownership of that. We've talked about decision making. We've talked about high performance. So that's that sort of meaningful alignment. And then you can't do this stuff by yourself. So that's where the meaningful connection comes in. So for me, that's where I talk about equity, diversity and inclusion. There's a lot going on in the world about that at the moment. True inclusion, true diversity contributes to better performance in teams, in organisations. So it's the right thing to do from a social justice point of view, and it's the smart thing to do from a business point of view. And actually from you as an individual, if you want to get better, listen to different people, take on board other perspectives. And then that's into relationships. So how do we have meaningful, fulfilling relationships? Stop looking for the one, to start with. How do we make fulfilling teams? How do we really drive team performance? That's not just the leader's job, that's everyone's job. And then when it comes to leadership, everyone leads. So there's some stuff in there about actually what does it mean to be a leader, focusing on what you need to do rather than who you are, then pulling all that together.
You can really, can I say that you could take all of this like findings and learnings and really apply it to everywhere in your life, not just work?
Absolutely. So that's why I talk about the book for me is finding fulfillment in your personal and professional life.
Yeah, it's just such a, how did you fit it into this? It's just so much.
Lots of editing.
Yeah, lots of psychology, lots of philosophy, lots of practicality and logic as well. Wow. I mean, this is going to change people's lives. It got nominated for an award.
Thank you very much. Yes, so it's into the finals of the Work and Life category in the Business Book Awards. So hopefully, yeah, we'll see where we go from there.
So because you live in alignment and you're doing what you love and you branched out,
Yep.
wrote a book, you're helping others, you rightfully so got nominated for an award. One of the most prestigious book awards that you can get.
That's it, yeah.
How does it feel to live your life's passion and almost get an award? Well, you probably will for it.
We'll see. It's competitive now. It feels amazing. I think in the last couple of weeks, coming on this podcast, or becoming an international podcast guest.
He's advertising himself. If you want to invite him, he'll be there.
That's it. No, as I say, being invited on podcasts like this, which is fantastic. Winning, being shortlisted for this awards, some really exciting projects at work with big clients. It feels like a real sort of living in alignment, pushing it. But also it's that chance to reflect and go, where am I putting my energies? So and you'll see this in terms of the energy that goes into content creation and social media to go, right, well, where do I want to be? Speaking at conferences. What's the purpose behind that? Why am I doing those things? Because every one of those that I do, that is less time at home, less time with family, less time with friends. So it's making sure that I do stay living in alignment with that book and remain intentional in my decisions and make sure that I don't sort of get caught up in it. And then I look back in 20 years and go, hang on, was that actually what I want to be doing with my time? So it's amazing and thought-provoking and challenging.
It's brilliant. I think you embody realistic happiness philosophy. Check out Pete's book as well. Where is it available? Everywhere, pretty much.
Pretty much everywhere. Yeah. Amazon, Waterstones, pretty much everywhere.
I think it's just been such a deep, incredible, like we've dissected your book, but also your brain, also your wisdom as well. And I think like you've helped me as well on my journey. I think you've helped the listeners as well. It's just been so nice to feel understood, and you've put everything so simply, even like the burnout, even the high performance, like finding your fulfillment and purpose. Like you just laid it out in a way that was so understandable and easy and digestible. And I think it's just been such an honor to have you on today. It's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor to be here.